Greetings students. Today we are going to learn about one of USA's leading financial services company, Lehman Brothers Holdings. Let us know this company in a much better way. Lehman Brothers Holding Incorporation was a global financial services firm. Before declaring bankruptcy in 2008, Lehman was the fourth largest investment bank in the US behind Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch, doing business in investment banking, equity and fixed income sales and trading, especially US, Treasury securities, research, investment, management, private equity and private banking. At 1:45 a.m. on September 15, 2008, the firm filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection following the massive exodus of most of its clients, drastic losses in its stock and evaluations of its assets by credit rating agencies. Lehman Brothers bankruptcy filing is the largest bankruptcy in US history and is thought to have played a major role in the unfolding of the late 2000s global financial crisis. The following day, Barclays announced its agreement to purchase, subject to regulatory approval, Lehman's North American investment banking and trading divisions along with its New York headquarters building. On September 20, 2008, a revised version of that agreement was approved by U.S. Bankruptcy Court Judge James M. Pike. The next week, Nomura Holdings announced that it would acquire Lehman Brothers franchised in the Asia-Pacific region, including Japan, Hong Kong and Australia, as well as Lehman Brothers investment banking and equities businesses in Europe and the Middle East. The deal became effective on October 13, 2008. In 1844, 23-year-old Henry Lehman, the son of a cattle merchant, immigrated to the United States from Rimbaud, Bavaria. He settled in Montgomery, Alabama, where he opened a dry goods store, H. Lehman. In 1847, following the arrival of his brother Emmanuel Lehman, the firm became H. Lehman and Bro. With the arrival of the youngest brother, Mayer Lehman, in 1850, the firm changed its names again and Lehman Brothers was founded.
I'm with Tom Brander from Lehman Brothers. Tom, you were just on a panel with me talking about capacity planning. What for you are some of the main issues around capacity planning at the moment?
Actually, with capacity planning, so many things came up at the panel, which was very interesting about all of the different aspects we look at capacity. But I feel to a certain extent we're scratching the surface because with the current nature of what's happening with the economy, a lot of companies, large companies, which had plans for building out new data centers and therefore achieving the capacity that they're lacking today, a lot of them have been shut down from this and now have to find other and better creative ways of supporting the business needs, which is typically continuing to grow. And we did key off a couple of times on what we could do with what we refer to sometimes as reserve capacity and the capability to use more of what you have. And one of the things I started looking at recently, as well as in the past couple of years, is how do we utilize some of the reserve capacity on the two-end sites that we have typically put in place for the business for highly resilient and redundant applications. We've deployed these in multiple data centers, many times at a 2N or a 2 times N+1 capability. And when you look at it, in effect, we're providing a 4 times recovery capability for that particular device and that particular application. With our DR capability where it exists today, which is typically fairly robust, there's no reason why we can't be starting to cut back on some of these highly robust data centers, going more into a N+ configuration on either side. And on the application level, it would still be looked at as an N+N or a 2N type environment, meaning that if one side goes down totally and complete, the application will continue to run on the other side.
During the 1850s, cotton was one of the most important crops in the United States. Capitalizing on cotton's high market value, the three brothers began to routinely accept raw cotton from customers as payment for merchandise, eventually beginning a second business trading in cotton. In June 2003, the company was one of 10 firms which simultaneously entered into a settlement with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) The Office of the New York State Attorney General and various other securities regulators regarding undue influence over each firm's research analyst by its investment banking division. Specifically, regulators alleged that the firms had improperly associated analyst compensation with the firm's investment banking revenues and promised favorable market-moving research coverage in exchange for underwriting opportunities. On Saturday, September 13, 2008, Timothy F. Geithner, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, called a meeting on the future of Lehman, which included the possibility of an emergency liquidation of its assets. Lehman reported that it had been in talks with Bank of America and Barclays for the company's possible sale. However, both Barclays and Bank of America ultimately declined to purchase the entire company. On Tuesday, September 16, 2008, Barclays announced that they would acquire a strip-clean portion of Lehman for $1.75 billion, including most of Lehman's North America operations. On September 20, this transaction was approved by U.S. bankruptcy judge James Peck. On September 20, 2008, a revised version of the deal, a $1.35 billion, pound 700 million, plan for Barclays to acquire the core business of Lehman, mainly its $960 million headquarters, a 38-story office building in Midtown Manhattan with responsibility for 9,000 former employees, was approved. Manhattan bankruptcy judge James Peck, after a 7-hour hearing, ruled, "I have to approve this transaction because it is the only available transaction."
As well, Mr. Miller, thank you for the time. You're one of the key witnesses here today, along with Dick Fuld, of course, and I want to get your sense about what we're going to hear later on this afternoon. Is it your view that Lehman still could have been saved and that the government should have stepped in as it did for some of its competitors, as Mr. Fuld will testify?
Yes, I believe that the government could have gone down an alternative path which would have avoided the severe consequences of the bankruptcy.
And it will lead you to that conclusion, because we've heard even from regulators this morning, Scott Alvarez, who's the general counsel of the Federal Reserve, who says, listen, there wasn't an option for us here. Lehman lacked the collateral to guarantee that taxpayers could be repaid in the future. Do you challenge that?
Yes, because if you look what happened on September 15th and the week following, is that in that week it's estimated $700 billion of value disappeared. The commercial paper markets froze up. The government could have sponsored a wind-down plan, an orderly wind-down for Lehman. It wasn't a bailout, but allow Lehman to wind down its affairs. It would not have had the same catastrophic circumstances.
The contention is there was no legal pathway for the government to do that.
Well, you know, I think Secretary Paulson said that the government did not have the tools. Funny, on Tuesday they found $80 billion for AIG. He must have found a screwdriver or something.
What does it tell you that 2 years after Lehman's collapse, we're still debating these issues, still talking about these issues? What do you think would have happened if Lehman had been given assistance?
I think the consequences, failure was going to happen at some point in time, but the consequences would have been much less severe. You would not have had a crisis of confidence. You have to remember, in every single financial crisis up until that time, there was always intervention. If you go back to long-term capital management, which is almost a template for what happened, the Federal Reserve put a lot of pressure on the street to put up money. The conservatorship of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Bear Stearns. Every single incident of financial crisis, there was always intervention.
Lehman's bankruptcy was the largest failure of an investment bank since Dressel Burnham Lambert collapse amid fraud allegations 18 years prior. Immediately following the bankruptcy filing, an already distressed financial market began a period of extreme volatility during which the Dow experienced its largest one-day point loss, largest intraday range more than 1,000 points, and largest daily point again. What followed was what many have called the perfect storm of economic distress factors and eventually a $700 billion bailout package, a troubled asset relief program prepared by Henry Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury, and approved by Congress. The Dow eventually closed at a new 6-year low of 7,552.29 on November 20, followed by a further drop to 6,626 by March of the next year. Nervosity spiked due to funding issues at the major investment banks. The fall of Lehman also had a strong effect on small private investors such as bondholders and holders of so-called mini bonds. In Germany, structured products often based on an index were sold mostly to private investors, elderly, retired persons, students and families. Most of those now worthless derivatives were sold by the German arm of Citigroup, the German city bank now owned by Credit Mutual. So students, we got to know about the various aspects. Hope you must have got useful information about the company. Have a good day ahead.